Miro, tell us President Xi Jinping's visiting schedule in Singapore, and tell us what is the expectation from Singapore.
Yes, Yizhi, Chinese President Xi Jinping and his wife Peng Liyuan, they arrived at about 5:45 this afternoon at Singapore's Changi Airport. And later on, they went to Singapore's President's official residence and office called Istana. And there, Singapore's President Tony Tan held an official welcome ceremony for them. And later today, there will be a state dinner hosted by Singapore President Tony Tan and attended by Singapore Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong. During the state dinner, Chinese President Xi Jinping and his delegation will get a chance to try Singapore's delicacy, things like chili crab and bak kut teh. And tomorrow, Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong and Chinese President Xi Jinping will sign several agreements, and there are many expectations from the business community. Many say that there will be an upgrading of the FTA between these two countries, and also a third city government-to-government project will be announced, and that's after the Suzhou Industrial Park and Tianjin Eco-City. Earlier this week, I spoke to the business community here in Singapore from both the Singapore business who have operations in China, as well as Chinese companies who have operations in Singapore. Take a listen to what they have to say. He's the chairman of China Business Community at Singapore Manufacturing Federation. He receives 60 delegations from China every year. As a link to the local community, he offers training to the Chinese officials about Singapore's business know-how and help them attract investment. He says the business community in Singapore are excited about Chinese President Xi Jinping's visit this week, hoping it will bring more opportunities.
We are expecting two major milestones during President Xi's visit. The first one being the upgrading of our FTA. I think we can probably have more, we can expect more liberalizations so that Singapore companies can venture into China, especially in the service sector. I think many companies in Singapore who are in the space of healthcare, education, as well as environmental services will benefit from all these liberalizations. Secondly, I think we are talking about the third government-led projects in China, and we all expect that Singapore companies can play a big part.
Chinese President Xi Jinping's visit this week is part of a year-long celebration to mark 25 years of diplomatic ties between China and Singapore. China is now Singapore's largest trading partner, and Singapore has been China's biggest investor since 2013. In the meantime, Singapore's pro-business environment has attracted more and more Chinese companies to set up their regional office here. Qingjian Group first came to Singapore in 1999 when it established a construction division. Over the years, it has broadened its business to property development and trading and material supplies. Its chairman says Chinese enterprises in Singapore have a lot of expectations from Xi's visit.
I believe President Xi's visit this time will strengthen the bilateral relationship between China and Singapore and chart the way forward. This kind of high-level exchange is definitely beneficial to the economies in both countries and therefore beneficial to the business community.
Qingjian says Singapore plays an important role in its expansion in Southeast Asia. Building on to the successful Singapore experience, Chinese enterprises like themselves can then venture into other emerging markets in the region. Singapore is not only important as a regional headquarters for Chinese companies. Politically, a good relationship between Singapore and China can also be beneficial to building relationship between China and ASEAN. And many believe that the upgrading of the FTA between Singapore and China can become a template for a more advanced FTA between China and ASEAN. Wang Yizhi.
Well, Miro, another important meeting will happen tomorrow. President Xi Jinping will meet with Taiwan leader Ma Ying-jeou. It is the first meeting of its kind since 1949. So what can we expect from the meeting, and what's the significance of it?
It's extremely significant. It's more than significant. It's historic. I spoke to the dean of Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy at the National University of Singapore yesterday. I I posed the exact question to him, and he said that this meeting is in fact a political miracle. The fact that the top leaders from mainland and Taiwan can sit down face to face and make direct communication is going to go down the history. And I also asked him, what can we expect from this meeting? And he said, for this kind of meeting, we better not to expect too much. He said back in the 1993, the famous Wanggu Summit also took place in Singapore. They were more specific because at that time it was non-official, although both organizations, Wang and Gu represented, were semi-official. And this time it's the top leaders. So the fact is more the symbolic meeting, and this kind of meeting, there will be more and more follow-up. And so in the follow-up meetings, we might see some concrete agreements. But from this meeting, the fact that they can sit down harmoniously, have a face-to-face communication is already a success.
Thank you very much. That was our correspondent Mira Lu in Singapore.